Welcome to this masterclass, Ask Me Anything. So I think I put this masterclass on because I thought it would be a fun thing to do with people. I am Jacqueline Hollows, also known as Mama J, and I've worked in UK prisons and in fact a prison in South Africa briefly for over 10 years. Now I've worked in addiction recovery. I've worked in some high risk prisons, and I've also trained dozens of facilitators and worked with over 500 inmates. Out of my work came 4 research papers, a memoir, private donations, crowdfunding. So, really, I've worked in the third sector a lot and I've got my hands into a lot of pies. So, I wanted to share with anybody who might be wanting to make social change. I wanted to share my experience and help you along the way. I set up the Impact Activator, which is a program to help people get their social projects started and increase the impact and the income by sharing my experience from the last 10 years and really answering any questions people have got. Because when I started working in prisons, there wasn't anyone else that had done it before, and I didn't have anyone else to turn to. And it was tough. I learnt the hard way. Feel free to put your questions in the chat and I'll answer them all as honestly as I can and with as much knowledge as I've got. If I don't know how to answer something, I will just tell you that I don't know. And if I think that there's a resource that can help you, I'll pass you on to that resource. So the first question that I had was, how do you find people to work with? Which is a really, really good question. So what's generally happened is you've had some sort of transformational change. You can see that what you know can change the world. So I remember when my son had his insight and he said, "We have to tell everybody, Mom." And I was like, yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. So you get that feeling. You really know that change has happened within you. Maybe you've overcome anxiety. Maybe you've overcome some sort of addiction. Maybe you've just got more joy in your life. Whatever it is, you've been able to change, and then you want to change other lives. And for people in the social sector, we want to take that even further. So work in prisons, work with homeless, community centres, work with refugees, etc. But how on earth do you get into those places? When I started, and I think I've told this story before, when I started, I thought, well, I work with all the addiction centres. They'll want to know that there's an easier way to overcome addiction than all the things that they're doing. But they didn't want to know. And I think that was partly because of the way I was talking about it. I would go in saying, I've got this thing. It's amazing. It's called the 3 principles and it'll change everything. And they thought, probably, well, we've been around for 20 years and we've got a thing and that works and it doesn't sound as woo-woo as your thing. So no, thank you very much. So I really wasn't helping myself. What I would say now is, and as I went on my journey, I learned that you want to be really professional. So you want to be going to organisations and working out what the gap is. So actually talking to them about where they're not being successful. So when we worked with the homeless community a couple of years ago, we got in because somebody I knew had volunteered there. So she got us an appointment. And then I really asked them questions. What's working? What are you doing well? And then what's not working? Where do you need help? And because you're genuinely interested and you're asking them about what they need, you can then talk to that gap. So in this particular instance, they were really happy with what they've got, and they also like to move people on really quickly. So they didn't want long-term programs because they want people to do well, get rehomed, and then get out of the system. That was the whole setup. So if I'd have pitched, I've got this 2-year program which answers deep trauma or something, that wouldn't have been any good. So I realized they need a quick program. But also they were a Christian charity. So they wanted not anything that spoke about spirituality, because their premise was only by finding Jesus do you get help. So we had to make a decision at that time. Can we run this program without referring to its spiritual foundation? And I thought, yes, we can. Yes, we can. We can still help people understand the nature of thoughts. We can still help people understand that they are using their reality against themselves, and the rest of it takes care of itself. So I agree to do that. Now, you may not. You may think, well, I don't want to hide, not that we hid it, but, I don't want to not talk about the spiritual aspect. So you have to make a decision. I like to say that when you have these meetings, you're feeling them out just as much as they're feeling you out. You're deciding, do I want to work with this organization? Are they a good fit? And then the other thing that we did was asked about what wasn't working. And what wasn't working for them is, no matter what they did, their clients still had the mentality of blaming external circumstances. So blaming the child, or blaming the system, blaming something else. And in the organization's words, not taking responsibility for any of their own behavior. So that's what we did. We said, well, we can definitely help with that, because people, once they've been through our program, develop a greater sense of self-efficacy. So they know that they are creating their reality, and they change because of that. So there becomes less of a blame culture and more of a opportunity culture. What can I do? And that eventually was starkly noticed by one of our clients there, who they absolutely didn't think could change, and changed from a very angry person to really taking things in his stride, and really noticing opportunities and taking advantage of those opportunities, and being able to get work and being able to get rehomed. So it's always about looking for that gap. And so what if people seem guarded about the problems? Is there a way around this? Good question. I haven't found that people are guarded around the problems. I think it's because if you build up that connection and rapport, if you go in with the attitude of, I can fix something, that it's the same as if you're talking one-to-one. If you're trying to fix something, they feel guarded. If you're going in with, I might have something that will enhance what you've already got, then you're actually talking professional to professional about what's working and what's not working. And I think that then they're more open. So I always start with what's going well, what's working, and genuinely praise that, because these are amazing organizations and they're doing amazing work. And then I tend to find that they're a little bit more open about their problems. Also, it might even be some of the standard things that might happen for that particular cohort or that particular organization. You can ask them, are you struggling with lack of retention, or are you struggling with people not showing up every week, consistency of attendance, or whatever it is that you think they might be struggling with, because that's a general problem in that area. they're probably going to say, oh, yeah, absolutely, doesn't everyone? But having reflected on that a little bit as well just now, I think that wherever you're finding resistance, it's look to where are you coming from? So when I'm trying to persuade someone that what I've got is a great thing, or I'm in this sort of locked horns, or I'm not getting anywhere, I know it's something about how I'm delivering that, and that I have some sort of attachment to the outcome. And so, for instance, that first meeting I had in the prison when it was just really resistant and asking me, how did they change? How did they change? And me saying, I don't know how they change. There was a lot of resistance there, but that was because I was completely insecure, completely unprepared for questions like that. I didn't even think that they would ask me questions like that, but of course they're going to. So in that instance, that's when I said, can we have a coffee and just take some time out? And when I relaxed and started talking, just chatting, that's when the other person stopped resisting and thought there's something in this, because they could hear, instead of me trying to persuade them into something, I'm actually just talking naturally. And then the resistance goes away. In the same way as when somebody says, oh, this sounds like, and then they liken whatever you've got to CBT or mindfulness or some other program that is not your program, but it sounds like. I don't argue with that. I ask them what they're hearing. Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean? And then they will tell me, well, thoughts, we are the creator of our thoughts. And I'd be like, yeah, that's true. That is exactly the same. We address that from a different direction. And then I will tell them about it. But I'll find the common ground, first of all, and engage them in that common ground. And I found that most people, they want to have that discussion and they're more open to seeing something different. So, how do you strike up conversations with strangers about what you do? I would say that it's a normal thing. We're all telling each other who we are and what we do most of the time. I mean, not in the supermarket, but generally speaking, if you're at a networking event or whatever, how do I do that? I listen. First of all, I just don't do it with random strangers, but people who I think, oh, I want to talk to them, I want to tell them, I listen to them for where they're at. So I'm always listening, and I haven't always done this. And so I have ended up in it, not so helpful conversations. But generally speaking, I will listen to where they're at, what they're doing, and I'm listening for opportunity in a way. It's not proper listening, but in a way I'm listening for opportunity to where it is relevant. And if then I'm able to say, well, what, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm very passionate about helping people start social projects, and I developed a whole program around it because I can see that there's a real need in society for somewhere to go, a safe space where people know they can get help, and it should be accessible to everybody. And it's very non-combative. It's very just like, yeah, that's a thing that I'm passionate about. So it's easy for me to talk about it. So you have to be passionate about what you're doing. So if you're not passionate about what you're doing, find what you're passionate about and then talk to people about why you're passionate about that. Stories, for instance. So my neighbour might sort of chat to me sometimes and, have to chit chat over the fence or whatever. We've gone on occasional walks. She's absolutely not in my target market at all. So I will tell her about what I'm doing in a very simple way, in a way that is relevant to whatever conversation she's bringing to me. If I was at a networking event, you're expected to talk at the networking event, but I don't like the old-fashioned networking event, hand your business card out, whatever. In those occasions, I would then be saying, I've previously run a business doing this, and now I'm passionate about bringing everything I know and teaching other people. And so I've set up a new business. So I talk about it in different ways with different people, with no agenda or expected outcome, with just the knowledge that there is an energetic exchange when you talk about what you're doing with confidence and clarity. Other people can hear you, and there can be all sorts of ways that can help you, because basically the universe wants to help you. So you talking about it will just really bring other opportunities into your life. Right back in the day, before I started my social enterprise Beyond Recovery, I had researched addiction and really saw that the existing paradigm of addiction is one of either harm reduction, or you're an addict forever and you have to go to AA forever. And intuitively, I felt that couldn't be right. So intuitively, I thought that this paradigm couldn't be right and somebody needed to do something about it. Anyway, it kept occurring to me, somebody needs to do something about this. And anyway, that person turned out to be me. So I was interviewing people. I'd been working with a few people, volunteering, completely voluntary. And I could see that the conversation I was having was helpful. And I was interviewing some people for a film. I was helping on a film production. And I had this massive insight that this is where I wanted to work. And during that day, I met a man in the park. It all sounds a bit dodgy, but it wasn't. And he ran an addiction service. So I started telling him, and I didn't know what I was talking about. But he could hear something. What I see now is that he heard the passion and the spirit coming through. He heard the essence of my insight, that I had something different. And he said, well, it sounds interesting. I think you need to come and talk to my group. Can I meet with you tomorrow? So he set up a meeting and we had a 3-hour meeting the next day. And he was very, very intellectual, very, very well trained. He was a psychologist. He absolutely knew everything about psychology. And he kept saying things like, oh, this reminds me of da da da. And he would say some model and some psychologists. I've done a bit of training in psychology, but I really didn't have a clue what he was talking about. And I just honestly would say, well, I don't know about that. But what I do know is this. And all I knew at that time, all I knew was people have unlimited potential. They are not stuck by their circumstances. That's all I knew. But that was enough, because that was enough to say, yes, but somebody who's had a lot of trauma in their life and is now an addict, they're going to struggle more. Well, maybe they're going to struggle more, but they still have unlimited potential and they are not limited by their circumstances. So no matter what was thrown at me, in a way, it was better to be more innocent, because no matter what was thrown at me, I could say I don't know, but I do know this. And he invited me then to go and talk to his group, and I went along and talked to his group. Now, remember, these were all strangers to me. This was all of a sudden I was in a group situation and everyone was there waiting for me to say something wise. I was absolutely petrified and I just was myself. I just said, I think I've found something really helpful. It's been helpful to me and I'd like to share it with you guys, and shared a little bit about it. And they were very warm and welcoming, and honestly, I don't think I was very good at all, but it was enough that I was certain that there's a truth in everybody has unlimited potential, and they don't have to be limited by their circumstances. So that one thing, that certainty carried me. And it's not about banging that home, but it's just about staying true to that certainty and being able to say, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but do you know what? That's an interesting point. I'll go and check that out. Here's a question. I get far too hung up on how to describe what I do rather than calling myself a life coach and watch their eyes glaze over. The common thread in my work as a 3P practitioner is anxiety in many forms, and I generally work with women in business, but it's that moment, like at a networking event, when that dreaded elevator pitch moment happens. My self-concern about getting that right definitely throws off the feeling people will get from me, which, as you say, is actually what people respond to. Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely right. I think a lot of us are in this space of, what do we call ourselves now? You know, coach means a certain thing, and mentor means something, and so on and so forth. I have got to the point where it really doesn't matter. It really, really doesn't matter. Sometimes I say one thing, sometimes I say another thing. I don't mind. As you pointed out, I like to talk to the result. And if you're a storyteller, even better, because you're in the elevator pitch moment, you could have a story. You can have a story that you tell 60 seconds of that story. So, like, for instance, I'll just think of a story of one of mine. I'm Jacqueline Hollows, and I have worked with someone who went from being completely depressed, couldn't get out of bed, to now completing a university degree. That can't have been more than 60 seconds. That's a snippet of one of my transformation stories that could get people going, well, how did you do that? And then you're into a conversation. You don't need to put yourself in the boxes that we've been told we have to put ourselves in. Find what works for you. If you're a storyteller, think of all different ways of telling that story in different bite-sized chunks. Those are the things that come to mind very easily when you've worked with people, and people get interested in, how does that transformation work? And of course, you're way more professional than me, and you won't say, I don't know, I just talk to them and they change, which is what I did in the beginning. You'll say, well, that's because I teach them about the nature of reality, or whatever it is, the way that you talk about things. If you haven't got those stories, then you tell your own story. So I might say, I struggled my whole life with feeling like an imposter, despite degrees, despite having a good job, despite people around me respecting me. I struggled with feeling like an imposter. And then I discovered something about the way my mind works. that really helped me. It helped me realize my own self-esteem and my own self-confidence without having to do any techniques. Most people are going to say, wow, how did you do that then? And then you've got that conversation on the go. So I wouldn't force a conversation. I would always, if someone's not interested, they're not interested. But there's so many ways that you can describe what you're doing without describing what you're doing that get people interested in that. I'm an author of a memoir, for instance, and I would say to people, I never thought I could write. I never imagined I could write a book. And now I'm an author of 3 books, and one of them is my self-published, not self-published, sorry, but my author solo published memoir. Different ways of talking about the same thing. And to the question, how do I find people to work with? I'm going to get off piste. We live in abundance. There are opportunities everywhere, infinite opportunities, infinite money, infinite resources. Any lack or scarcity is a learned situation from society or from people who want us to think that there's lack or scarcity. And it's simply not true. The whole essence of the universe and us and nature is abundance. Therefore, there must be your people. There must be abundant opportunities to work with people. There must be abundant opportunities to create relationships, to start conversations, to find funding models. It's just a fact. It must be true if we live in abundance. And the only thing that stops us is thinking that we can't. I do an exercise whenever I feel overwhelmed or feeling like I haven't got enough money or I'm going to struggle to pay the rent next month or whatever. I get really, really overwhelmed with it. I get very close-minded. I get worried. Then I notice that I'm doing that, which is great, isn't it, that we know that? So I notice I'm doing that to myself. And the way I usually get myself out of it is put some music on, get my big flip chart out, or my bullet journal, and then just brain dump all the ways that I could make £1,000 this week. And I'm always amazed at how many ideas I come up with. And they're all like ranging from, well, I could make cupcakes and go to the local market, and I could sell stuff on eBay. I could maybe get some coaching clients. I could do this, I could do that. I suddenly come up with this fountain of ideas. I could ask somebody for money. There's so many ideas. What that does for me is it reminds me that I live in abundance. And the only thing stopping me is me. And then I can pick one of those things. But usually the point of the exercise isn't to find the thing. The point of the exercise is to basically expand my consciousness again so that I can see and live back in an abundant mindset instead of the worry and scarcity mindset. And it's just amazing. It works every time. It amazes me that I forget. I have to do it again. but it really works every time. So how do you find clients? You just keep talking to people. So going back full circle to how do you start conversations with strangers? You tell them stories, you talk to them about stuff, you ask them about them, and you keep talking about what you're doing. As entrepreneur coaches, which is what we are, because we have to go and get our own businesses, no one's giving it to us, that's something you have to do. It just comes with the territory. So the sooner you embrace that it's not hard you just can't see it yet. Like riding a bike, like learning to drive a car, like learning anything, it's not hard when you know how to do it, but beforehand it looks hard. And then you do it and it becomes easy. And you realize, oh, I'm going to talk to that person and that person. Exactly the same for me. When I started the Impact Activator, I had the thought in January and I started it just recently, the first cohort. I thought, well, I'll write down everyone I know. And I had like a list maybe of 10 names. And I thought, I'm going to struggle to find people to talk to about this. But as you channel your mind towards this is what I want to do, more and more ideas come. So every day I get ideas. You could contact that person, you could ring them, you could go to this thing, you could do that. Because I am focused and towards that direction, and the universe wants to help you. So you get the ideas and then you're not scattered and you know that this is what you want to do and what you want to talk about. So you just keep doing it. So I'd love to know what your biggest takeaway has been today. I have got another Impact Activator starting in May, and it is currently at the early bird rate. But also, anybody who turned up live on this call can have an additional one-to-one if you buy the program before the 11th of April. So that's a special offer to you, special people. Right, so the takeaway of to tell stories. I like the idea of the storyteller and not have to force myself into a box of what I should do. Brilliant. That's a great takeaway. Thank you. I am very, very grateful for you coming. Thank you so much. I loved running this with you today. I'd love to see you again. I am offering a discovery call to anyone who would like to know more. So I'm just going to pop that link in the chat. And I will also send out an email with that link in, so you'll get the email. Thank you so much. And thank you for the hearts. Okay, everybody. Bye.